Let's look at Chapter 3, Question 5. Now, this problem is a list of test scores on an English test. Now, since this is an organizational psychology course, you might think, ooh, an English test is not too relevant. But actually, reading someone's English can be quite useful. In fact, that's one of the functions of a cover letter when somebody applies for a job. So when a job applicant submits a cover letter, the cover letter can be evaluated for a number of things. It can be evaluated for its clarity and its grammar, and whatever score is given can be used as kind of a rough measure of cognitive ability or written communication skill or English ability. It's not going to be a perfect measure of any of those, but it will be a rough measure of all those, and it's a legitimate way to evaluate a candidate. So let's suppose in this example that for a certain position, 88 applicants have applied, and that their cover letters have been graded for their written communication ability. You want to better understand the data that you've collected. You want to get an idea of what's the distribution, what does it look like? So in this question, we're going to do 4 parts. A says we're going to make a frequency distribution of ungrouped scores, so a bin width of 1. And then we're going to use a bin width that's wider and more practical. And then we're going to make a histogram. And then we're going to look at the skew of the histogram and see if it's more symmetrical or if it's skewed either positively or negatively. So we are going to use, here we have the scores. To make our frequency table, we're going to start off with, we need to make a pivot table. So we are going to go to Design, Summarize with Pivot Table, and it says Select a Range. I said, yep, let's do Table 4. We're going to use an existing worksheet, and let's put the location, how about here at N5? That will be a good location. And so we click OK. Now we've got a command going on here, a pivot table. And the only thing that we can choose from is scores. So we click on scores. It goes down to values. We don't want the sum of the scores. We want to change that field value settings to count. So we're going to change it to count. And then the rows, we want also to be scores. So I'm going to take scores, I'm going to drag it down into rows. And here we have row labels and count of scores. So now we have a frequency table, but you know, there's a few issues here. Or actually, one big issue is that all the bins aren't being shown. There's 46, 47, 48. There's nothing in those bins, so those aren't being shown. It would be a lot more logically consistent to show those bins. So how are we going to do this? Well, to get the bins to show, we need to group. So we're going to press group, and it says starting at 45, going to 98, and we want just a bin width of 1, so we're going to group by 1. So I just change that to 1, and I press OK, and now it says 45 to 45, there's 1. Ooh, that's kind of nasty looking. We're going to have to change that, and then 49 to 49, there's 2. It still doesn't show all the bins, and that's because we need to show empty bins. So I right click on this, go to field settings, go to print and layout, and down here it says show items with no data. So that will show us all the empty bins. So I click that, and that is okay. And so now we've got all the bins, and how many are in each. It leaves a blank for 0, but it shows which ones are blank. Now, 45 to 45 sounds pretty bad. So what we would need to do is we would need to go through and adjust all of these if we wanted to make it look really nice. I'm not sure. Well, actually, I am sure. I don't want to go through all of those right now. You can leave them as 47 to 47 for all of them. But if we were going to publish this, we'd want to repeat that and save that. So this is bin width of 1, bin width of 1. Now, for question B, we're supposed to do a bin width of 15. Now, something funny is that you can only have one pivot table at a time, so we need to make this stop being a pivot table. And the way that we do that is we're going to copy it and paste it into itself, just copying the values. So if I highlight this whole table, so I did shift right arrow, now I'm doing shift down arrow, copying that whole thing. So I'm going to do copy. And now I'm going to go to paste. And it says there's an option for paste values. And I'm just going to paste the values there. And now it's no longer a pivot table. It's just a bunch of text. Now we've lost the formatting. So I'm going to go back to insert table. And it says this what for your data. And I'm going to say yes. And there we have a table again, and it's no longer a pivot table and won't interfere. So now we want to go over to B, and we want wider bin widths. So here it says about 15 bins. Oh, that's kind of a lot. Let's do rather than just doing it by the number of bins, let's do it by some logical grouping. Let's do it by multiples of 5. So let's create our. I'm going to move this over here. Let's create our pivot table again. So we're going to do design. Okay, so we're clicked in the table for the scores. I'm going to go to design, summarize with a pivot table, and it's summarizing table 4. I want to do the existing location. I'm going to click in there and let's put it right next to there into Q5. Then I'll press OK. And let's take scores and put them into the values column. Now we need to change, we don't want the sum of the scores. So I press this down arrow, go to value field settings, and change this to count. And then for the rows, I'm also going to drag scores there. And we have like what we did before, but this time we're going to group them. Let's go into the pivot table, right click, group, and we're going to start at 45, and let's group by 5. Let's see what we get. And here we've got 45 to 49, 50 to 59. So once again, we've got a few things that are missing, so we need to show those. So I'm going to right click, go into field settings, go into layout and print, and I'm going to show items with no data, and there we have them all. And it's added less than 45 and greater than 100. Now, we can turn those off if we go into the filter here, and if we don't want the less than 45 column, we can turn that off. If we don't want the greater than 100 column, we can turn that off. And so now we have a frequency table that looks pretty good. We've got those are a lot more logical bin widths. So now C is going to be to make a histogram. So let's go into the pivot table, and we want to, now if you are using a Mac, it's important that you summarize that you highlight these scores only and not the bottom scores. I believe that's how you do it on a Mac. For a PC, you don't have to do that. You can just click any place there. But we want to go into the pivot table. Let's go to insert, and we want to get a bar chart, and we want a 2D one, and that gives us a 2D chart. Let's put that down here. Now, this is a bar chart. We want to tweak this a bunch. So let's change that title first, so it's a lot more clear. So this is scores on cover letters. Okay, now we want to change this into a histogram. So I'm going to click on a bar till they're all lit up. And now I'm going to format the width. I could do that by right-clicking, or I can go over here and click on these. On older versions of Excel, you need to find the field up here that would be appropriate. I'm going to gap width, I am going to change to 0. And there, we have changed that into a histogram. Now, I also want to change the borders of these bars. So I use this paint bucket, the fill in line. I went into the border. I want a solid line, and I want a width of about 2.25 is good. And I want it black, so it'll stand out. And that should be, I'm going to click out to see what it looks like. And there we've got a histogram that looks pretty good. Now, how else can we tweak this? This total this doesn't add anything. Let's delete that. I clicked on that, and then I'll delete it. Now, we've got the, it says count of scores. That's pretty close. That's what the y-axis for, and scores here is what the x-axis is. I think that's pretty good. So this is a good example of a histogram. Now, question D is about the skew. And we look at this, and it might be a little negatively skewed because there's a few out there, but there's a few more here than we'd expect. I'd say this is pretty symmetrical. And there we have a clear indication of what the distribution of scores are. So we might say, well, yeah, there's about 10 people that got 90 and above. Maybe we ought to concentrate on them and maybe make sure that we double scored them correctly, or whatever. We might want to say that these people, this is definitely a red flag. They had a lot of problem with their cover letter. Maybe we should eliminate them immediately. But we've got some more data that we can use in helping determine whether we should hire who we should hire for this position.